Power on.
Now entering the gaming grid. The latest gaming news, reviews, and retro culture, as only the man of tomorrow can deliver. And here's your host, Brian Sovryn.
Oh yes, the man of tomorrow is here. And it is time for the gaming grid, which means we are going to be talking video games, baby. One of the few times, I have quite the podcast recording career. And as a career, I make money off of it. And this is one of the few times I feel like I ever get to be happy. I know I say this every episode, but we usually only do the gaming grid once a month, sometimes twice a month. I'd love to do it more. And in fact, with my latest acquisition, I might just do that. This episode, we got about 3 things we're going to talk about. There's a lot of other news that I could have broken into. I will save that for another episode to do, where it's just a lot more news, but we've got some reviews to get into. 3 points to bring up. One of the points, why I did not end up getting a Sega Genesis Mini. We'll get to that in a second, but then also we're going to have a review of Mario Kart Tour, which is the Mario Kart game for mobile platforms, iOS and Android. And then we have the review of that acquisition I just mentioned, which is I finally have a Nintendo Switch, that being specifically the Nintendo Switch Lite, which came out on September 20th. That's part of the reason the gaming grid is coming out later in the month. Usually I front load it earlier on in the month, but the reason that it's coming out later is because I wanted to review this for September, and so we will get into that. But on the 19th of September, you did have the Sega Genesis Mini come out. Now, the bulk of the reviews that I've read from varying sites like Kotaku, Verge, go down the list of just about any, I can't even think of a media outlet that didn't really cover this thing. And the reviews were largely, just super positive. Some people going so far as to say this is the best retro console or mini console to date. Even though I don't have one, I would argue that I don't think so. I still think that the C64 Mini, which, boy, clock's ticking on the full-size C64 is supposed to come out this year. And of course, later in October, and I do want to review this, we're supposed to be getting the Capcom arcade console that's supposed to come out. But anyway, I don't know if the Capcom arcade console is going to end. I've read some interesting reviews in Retro Gamer, or interesting pre-reviews, I guess. Would you call them previews? They were, some of the guys at Retro Gamer were able to test the thing out, and they were pretty fucking impressed. But the C64 full-size is supposed to be coming out very, very soon. I did see an update from the team there. Was it Retro Games Limited? I did see an update from them that the controller, for which was my main critique against the C64 Mini, is that controller was a piece of shit. This controller actually has micro switches, so it should work a lot better. We'll see if and when that ends up coming out in 2019. Though, I am confident they're going to release it. Maybe it won't actually come out this year like I think they had planned. But the C64 Mini, I think, is still far and away the best retro console to date, partly because there is such an active scene of developing new games for the Commodore 64, and the fact that, point blank, the C64 Mini can play, you can sideload new games or other games that maybe didn't come with it originally. And the updates for the C64 Mini have been fantastic. Adding in new games, a lot of great new features, as to where, the other retro consoles updating. Look, I don't want them to connect to the internet, and the C64 Mini doesn't. It just does it through sideloading. I like the fact that these systems don't connect to the internet, but boy, it's fucking nice. I know the Capcom one is supposed to, for like leaderboards and everything. But boy, it's fucking nice to be able to update a system and get new features and everything as well. So I like that kind of hybrid solution that the C64 Mini brings. Anyway, the real reason, Okay, the reason that, I mean, again, the reviews are through the roof for the Sega Genesis Mini. If it ever goes down in price or something, it doesn't look like it's sold out at all. Like, they're still well available. It's not because of, and this is a valid concern that people have brought up. Something that people have brought up is that, and we've talked about this actually, is that I think it's a Retrobit. The Genesis Mini itself only comes with a 3-button controller. Of course, later on in the Genesis life, during its most popular era, one could even argue, it had a 6-button controller available. And to get the 6-button controller, you have to buy separate controllers from Retrobit. Now, it's not a bad deal from Retrobit. They're $20 a pop. They're USB, so that means you could, they have double usage, right? You could use them on your PC, maybe with a Genesis emulator, or you could, use them in the Genesis Mini. So I don't think that that's that horrible. That is kind of a shoddy move. Especially since the other thing that's disappointed me is that there was the Tower of Power that was getting released, the accessory that made the Genesis Mini look like it had the 32X and the Sega CD and all this. That did not end up getting released elsewhere. I don't know that it's going to end up getting released elsewhere. It doesn't have to do with that. I mean, I'm a little disappointed in that because I do like the idea of accessories and everything coming out for all this. But the real reason that I didn't get it, the real reason, quite simply, I mean, again, maybe if it goes down in price or something like that, and it's like an offer I just can't pass up on, sure. Or, if a Sovereign Tech listener wants to get, or, a Zomi 1 listener wants to give me one, fine. Well, obviously I'd take it. But the reason I didn't go for it, there's a couple reasons. One is, is that, frankly, like, a lot of the games on there, they're the top versions we know now. While they did release some awesome games, and I assume those ROMs will be available to download at some point, because there are some games that are unique to the Genesis Mini, like Tetris and Darius, and some others. But some of those games, either the Sega Ages version on the Switch is superior, or even the versions on the 3D versions for the Nintendo 3DS are superior. Like, I don't want to go backwards and play the older versions of the games. I mean, I don't mind doing that, but some of them I've gotten so used to playing with newer features that it would feel a little weird, and I don't think I'd spend as much time, playing them that way. So there's that. But the real reason is that I would rather save up my beans for the Mega SD, which we reviewed, or we talked about the Mega SD when it was announced, which is basically a Genesis cartridge, okay, that is an FPGA board that can play Sega CD games in any Genesis console, okay, that can accept a cartridge, like, say, Analog's Mega SG, which is an awesome console, and actually part of me would even rather have that than the Genesis Mini. Anyway, the Mega SD, what I learned based on reviews of that, and this is a couple weeks before, and I announced this on Twitter that I wouldn't be getting it, so that way you weren't expecting a review from me. But as soon as was it My Life in Gaming? I think it was My Life in Gaming on YouTube that they got their hands on a Mega SD. And I found out that it can actually emulate Sega Genesis games as well. Can't do 32X as far as I know, but it can do Genesis games and Sega CD games. I was like, well, fuck, the thing costs $250, but like I said, I'll just set aside my beans to get that thing, down the line. Because that's the real winner, because you want to be able to rock. I mean, my argument for getting the Genesis Mini was, okay, I want to send the market signal that I eventually want a Sega Saturn Mini, and I really still do. I don't know. Hopefully the reviews that Sega's gotten is enough for them to want to do the Saturn Mini, and that'll still happen. But yeah, I mean, I got to say this, and I don't, because this gets into philosophy, and I don't generally do that with Gaming Grid, not so much. I understand the argument of voting with your dollar. I understand the point. I get that. But to vote with your dollar for something that you're probably not going to touch too often. And look, I mean, I rock my Neo Geo Mini a lot, especially for the multiplayer. I In fact, actually, that's not a piece of news we're going to get to. There's going to be a new Neo Geo quote unquote mini, but it's not that impressive. We can save that for another time. I play my C64 mini a lot. The Nintendo consoles definitely rock those quite a bit. The Genesis Mini it's just not something I'm going to pick up that often. If it did have, as I wanted, if it did have Jurassic Park and X-Men on there, I probably would. I don't think anything would have stopped me from getting it, because I just love those games so damn much, and everything else that's available on the Genesis Mini was really, really sweet. Again, the exclusive games that are on it, I expect to get my hands on the ROM for it. I mean, frankly, I have the ROM for Star Fox 2, from the Super Nintendo, even though I did get my hands on that, for the SNES Mini. But anyway, yeah, the vote with your dollar thing, if it's not something you're really going to touch, I mean, why is it onus on me? And it's not. No one's putting a gun to my head, obviously. Why is it onus on me to basically fund the next system? I mean, it feels like kind of a Kickstarter, and I'm not against Kickstarters. In fact, another thing I had lined up for this episode was Homeworld 3 was announced, and they are doing a crowdfund for that, which I did take part in. Okay. But I just, no, not something I'm barely going to touch. I'm not going to fucking do that. So anyway, all of that said, I didn't end up getting the Genesis Mini. If a Saturn Mini comes out, yeah, I mean, that makes sense, because the emulation for the Saturn is dodgy. The availability of games for the Saturn is, ridiculous. Like, it's a pain in the ass to try and get some of the great games that you want. Not Orta. You know what I'm talking about. Panzer Dragoon, not Orta. Yeah, just there's a great case to be made for getting a Saturn Mini. The Genesis Mini, especially since if the Mega SD didn't come out, I might feel differently about it. But since the Mega SD is a real thing, that's really the way to go to play Genesis games and, also perhaps more importantly, Sega CD games. I mean, and the options in the Mega SD are fucking insane. I mean, what a great little piece of kit. So I want that pretty bad. And that's the direction more that I want to go. And when I get one down the line, I will certainly be doing a review here. Now, that said, none of that is a knock against the Genesis Mini. I am fairly certain, and I've seen other reviews. I know, who's it? Mike over at Angry Video Game Nerd or at Cinemask or whatever. He made some kind of, apparently some of it was tongue in cheek. They reviewed the Genesis Mini, and he said he thought that some of the frame rate issues, some of these things were problems. I don't know, whatever. I'm sure that the system's great. Bottom line, open it up, plug it in. It's awesome. I don't doubt that for a second. So it's not a knock on the Genesis Mini. It's just, I think that there are better options. Not to say that this is a bad one, but there are better options out there, and that being the Mega SD. So, all right. Let's talk about something that is a piece of shit, though. And I mean, this really is a piece of shit. And no, not the Switch. The review for the Switch is coming. This is not talking about the Switch. Mario Kart Tour for mobile. Fucking A. I hate this. 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 You can't trust install numbers, okay? I hate the fact, and I'm going to have to make just some kind of, I need to make some kind of bullshit, account, okay? But even then, I hate the fact that to try this stuff out, okay, to try some of these games out, that I give these games like an install number that they can use as a way of saying, oh, this is successful or something like that. You can trust install numbers a little bit with some things, okay, that you download as far as apps, because there's concerns, around, does the app have malware in it, whatever. Obviously, a game from Nintendo isn't going, licensed by Nintendo. Let's be very clear on that. DNA is the company that actually makes the mobile games and mobile apps for Nintendo, even though it has the Nintendo branding on it. I just hate giving these things an install number. I really do. This game, though, requires you, Mario Kart Tour okay, which again is Mario Kart on mobile. I know that sounds awesome. I reviewed it on the Gaming Grid, or I talked about the preview and what information we knew about it previously on the Gaming Grid. And I was like, this isn't going to work because the controls just, no way. Like, controls on smartphones are shit. Maybe if you allow it to connect to some kind of a gamepad, more traditional gamepad, maybe then it would be worthwhile. But it's, otherwise the touchscreen controls suck. Okay. And that ended up being that little bit of insight on my part, not that I'm the only one that knows this, ended up being a reality with this game. This game, it is just replete with problems. One of them being you do not have an option to hook up an external controller to it. In fact, I even installed it onto, and again, I hate that I'm giving it install numbers. I even installed it on a Chromebook to see if the Chromebook could somehow, maybe if it could interact with the keyboard and work better. Nope. It's locked in that it works with a gyroscope and touchscreen, and those controls do not work well at all. There's an auto drift feature for it. The controls on this thing are horrible. That's just true of, unless it's like an RPG or something turn-based, that will always, or I don't know, Fruit Ninja or something, or I don't know, Angry Birds. Unless it's something along those lines. This is just always going to be true about any mobile game. The controls are going to suck. They can't help it. Touchscreens are just inefficient. At any time you port a popular series, okay, and this would be true of Mario Kart, it's true, take your pick of the game. Anytime you port that over, you have to completely change the way that the game is played, which could be detrimental to the game itself, which that's true for Mario Kart, or you're going to have shitty controls, which is also true of Mario Kart in the case of Mario Kart Tour. Now, that's just for starters. Controls are shit. But to even get to the game, to be able to play it, you have to log in with a Nintendo account. You have to log in with a Nintendo account. I get it. I have a Nintendo account. I've had a fucking Nintendo account as long as there have been Nintendo accounts. It's not a problem for me, but for a lot of other people, yeah, it's a fucking problem. And it just seems like a really, really shady practice, to basically force people to get, to force you to give your email to Nintendo. Is it the price of admission because this game is effectively free? Well, that's not exactly true, but we'll talk more about that in a second. Sure, but I think that's shitty. I really, really think that's shitty because I don't know. This gets into funny areas. A lot of people in the entertainment industry, this is gaming, movies, TV, take your comics, I don't care. Take your pick of what venue within the entertainment industry we're talking about. There is this consistent argument of when something is called bullshit, or some other term is used against it, or some other argument is used against it, okay, something is antagonistic towards it, an argument that often comes up is, well, this is made for kids. Okay, well, if this is made for kids, are we giving, and I've heard this, because I've seen where people have made the comment, hey, this is a game for, for I don't know, people between 6 to 12 or something like that. Are we really giving kids email addresses that early? Are we tagging them that soon? Fuck, I hope not. I've had an email address, I guess, since I was, 14, 15, something like that. But then I was well ahead of the curve in the PC revolution. Okay, that's a very different time, very different situation. I would not, it's one thing for a parent to be a steward and perhaps, I know some parents will, they'll buy the URL of their child's name or something like that to kind of protect it or have it there for them if they want to become their own entrepreneur later, or who the fuck knows what. And maybe they do the same with an email address. I don't know. Okay, I understand that. But the idea that to play a game, a kid needs a fucking email address and to log in these days is fucking horseshit. But I don't buy that argument anyway. No. These companies want everybody fucking possible playing their shit, watching their shit, whatever. Okay. Just I've heard this argument for, well, you need to be kinder to Star Wars movies, like to modern Star Wars movies, or to like The Last Jedi, because, oh, really, it's a movie about space wizards and it's meant for kids. The fuck Star Wars is meant for kids. Not entirely. I mean, and that's it. People, I mean, look, and I love episode 1, but the idea that the way that you make episode 1 of Star Wars a good movie is by saying, well, but you gotta understand it's for kids. No. As soon as that opening line comes up about, there's a blockade happening because of unfair taxes and all this stuff. What fucking kid in their right mind, A, should even be concerned, or should even be, not concerned, but should be even thinking about, taxes. If anything, their parents should be working on a world where taxes aren't even a fucking thing. But sorry, I'm getting philosophical on you again. But B, I mean, no kid gives a rat shit about that, and nor should they. And speaking of money, while we're on that, so yeah, that kid argument, no, go fuck yourself. Another thing is that, let's say you're right though. Let's say, oh yeah, well, understand this is just meant for kids. This game, to take advantage of basically everything within it, and you can't get very far without really needing to get into this. First off, there's an in-game currency, but there's actually 2 of them, which the adding of complexity with that is preposterous. What is rubies and coins? Those are the 2 currencies, and they do 2 different things. But then to be able to get access to other stuff within the game, there's a $4.99 fee. Oh, hold on. No. This isn't like Mario, like Super Mario Run or whatever that was. Where you pay out $10 just once and then you unlock everything in the game. No. This is $4.99 a month. A year, you'd spend $60 a year on a game with horrible fucking controls. Okay. When frankly, you could buy, in fact, right now they're selling them. It's like purple or something. You could buy, for the price of a smartphone and a copy of Mario Kart 7. I mean, you can get that for $150 right now. That's cheaper than a smartphone and paying for this game. If you wanted to play some real Mario Kart, do that. Do that. I mean, Mario Kart 7's fucking great. I mean, I haven't tried out Mario Kart 8 Deluxe yet on Switch, but 7's dynamite. And away you go. Maybe I think there was some DLC in it, but you don't need that to rock the game. This is so shitty. This game isn't. I mean, maybe this is a $5 one-time fee. Maybe that would somehow be okay. But $5 a month for like this gold card pass? And again, if it's for kids, what the fuck? No, this is shitty just across the board. And then, I mean, you can buy more rubies and everything, and I think you can get, I don't know, you can spend another $70 on that. And come on, Nintendo. In fact, I saw somebody tweeting about this, and they basically said they wondered if this game being so horrible, and believe me, it is. And do you want to talk about frame rate issues? This game's got them too, depending upon your device, I suppose. But even on high-end devices, I've heard it's pretty bad. They wondered if this was really a game just to convince people to go buy consoles again. Because this is so terrible that if you really want to play Mario Kart, it basically forces you to go pick up a 3DS or a Switch. I mean, if that's... I mean, there's no way Nintendo's doing that, but that'd be funny as hell, and I'd almost be supportive of that. but regardless, this is so bad. I mean, and the lack of settings options that you have, like you can't turn on manual drift. The smart steering's terrible. This is a horrible, horrible Mario Kart game. And that's crazy to even say, because Mario Kart is one of those things, it's like sex. It's like, yeah, or like pizza. It's like, yeah, even when it's bad, well, it's still good. Mario Kart it just has always been that thing you can count on any system that you're going to have a great time. Even people that didn't like the GameCube. Mario Kart Double Dash was fucking brilliant. It actually has mechanics in it that no other Mario Kart game has really emulated yet, and that I really miss. the twin driver thing, all that. I mean, awesome shit. Mario Kart is just that game you can count on no matter what's going on. You can pop it in, you can rock it for a little while and walk away. And Mario Kart Tour is just a smear on that entire game series. Nintendo is, I've heard Dragalia Lost is pretty good. Animal Crossing, I did mess around with that on mobile. I did not mess around with the Fire Emblem game. But they've got to pick it up. They've got to get the shit back into action. I mean, or just stay. I know you can say, well, look, you've got to have a presence in mobile. Fine, do shit like Dragalia Lost, where it is a totally new IP. It's designed for mobile, so there's no expectations. Don't do this stuff. Don't do this stuff. If there's ever like a Metroid or a Zelda game on mobile, I mean, they're gonna fuck themselves so hard. And as we're going to get into, I don't think Nintendo has to worry about it because basically Nintendo's old way of thinking. And I heard this, I've known this, but I've heard this, shall we say, secondhand, right from the horse's mouth. I know that sounds strange to say, but I heard this from a guy, man, this is bringing back some memories. Going back to Electronics Boutique, okay? Going back to Electronics Boutique, that used to be, of course, that ended up getting bought out by GameStop, which, talk about a place that's in trouble. Anyway, there's a guy I used to talk to. This guy, big dude, shorter guy, but he was really jacked, spent a ton of time in the gym. I'm not going to say his name, but he was like the manager of the local Electronics Boutique when I was growing up. From growing up to becoming a teenager, like he was the guy. In fact, he worked at I know none of this really matters to you, but he worked at a mall that ended up closing down. Like he was at that store, then he moved to the other mall in upstate New York, where you'd end up where everybody ended up going after the one mall closed that was nearby. I mean, this guy was just a gamer for life, and he would go to Japan. He ended up becoming like a GM, basically, or what equates to a general manager of Electronics Boutique. He ended up going to Japan, literally sat at a table with Shigeru Miyamoto, the whole thing. I mean, he had pictures of it, would put it up on the walls there and everything. And he heard this basically from Nintendo execs themselves. And this is Nintendo's way of thinking. This is kind of insider stuff. Okay, I think most people can could extrapolate this based on how Nintendo does business, but when you hear it more directly, it's important. And this is basically what this guy, what had been expressed to him, is that Nintendo's way of thinking is, and this was just before the GameCube was coming out. Nintendo's way of thinking is that fine, Microsoft can come out with a console, whoever the fuck in the world can come out, Panasonic, whoever wants to come out with a console, they can come out with a console. You can buy whatever console you want from any of those people, but you're always going to buy a Nintendo console. That's their way of thinking is that you'll buy a Nintendo console and then maybe you'll buy something else from one of the other guys. Like you might buy one other one. But so their way of thinking is everybody will have two consoles at all times. Did that end up becoming true? Nah, maybe not so much. Not during the GameCube era anyway, but with the Wii, it picked right back up with the Wii U. Anyway, I think Nintendo has very much learned a lot of lessons from all this, and that's why they have such a dominant position with the Switch. That said, the Switch Lite, now we talked about this on Sovryn Tech, but I know we've reiterated it on the Gaming Grid, and particularly when the Switch Lite was announced, I brought this up again. Something else that Nintendo executives have said openly is that they don't want it to be one Switch per home, which is Nintendo's old thinking, right? With that phrase, with that statement that I just gave you before from their pre-GameCube days, is that everybody will own a Nintendo console and then maybe they'll own something from the competition, but they have to pick one. Or, they'll always have Nintendo and then they pick one of the others. Now their way of thinking is that it's not going to be not one Switch per household, it's one Switch per person. Everybody is going to own a Nintendo Switch. They basically want the Switch to be as ubiquitous as a smartphone. And frankly, with the Switch Lite, I think they can do it. I think that they can really pull that off. Okay? And so for them to feel like they need to have a presence in the mobile space, in smartphones, no, No, I don't. Maybe have which they do. They have the companion chat app or whatever for the Switch or for Nintendo Switch Online. Do that. But otherwise, no, you don't need a presence there at all, because I really think they can. And Mario Kart and things like this are proving the point. And a lot of the bullshit in the mobile gaming space is proving the point that, you could, the way that games were sold originally, or even doing something like Switch Online, where you have a service which we'll talk about during our review of the Switch Lite, where you have a service that offers, a ton of games. I mean, this is the same thing that, this is Google Stadia, this is Microsoft xCloud, which, by the way, I think there's a public beta going out for, it's somewhat private, but you can sign up for it, I think, for xCloud. That's becoming a thing, I think end of October. But anyway, having something like that's an attractive prospect for people, but they need those great controls in their hands. And I think they're making a great argument for why consoles still matter. Now, there's a caveat to that I'm going to get into when we talk about the Switch Lite. But that's my point, is that I think Nintendo can absolutely, I think they can achieve their goal of a Switch in every hand. Okay, a Switch per person. And then everybody else has a smartphone. So they don't need to be there, because the Switch, everybody will have a Switch. Again, I really think that they're getting to that point, and I think a couple of years from now, there could be some very interesting different moves in that direction. But that's a prediction on my part. So Mario Kart Tour, don't bother with it. Just don't fucking bother with it. Don't touch it. Don't install it. Trust me. And I'm sure there's plenty of other reviewers out there who probably came to similar conclusions. Go for it if you want. I mean, reading up on other people's opinions, but I've yet to see a really positive opinion of this game. And again, that's downright insulting to one of the greatest franchises, gaming series of all time. It is an absolute insult to that. So what a pity. But anyway, let's get into what you've all been waiting for, which is my review of the Nintendo Switch Lite. Now, I'm going to start this off with a statement that plays off of what we were just saying. And here's what I'm going to say to you. Is that I think Nintendo, their real future, okay, and this requires whether it ends up being like Stadia, where you have a controller that plugs in nicely, or that can connect nicely with whatever screen, and that I think Nintendo. Okay, let me make the statement first, then we'll make the second statement, then we'll get into the review. Here's my statement. I am concerned. Now, there might be like a Nintendo Switch Pro that will come out, but I am concerned, and I know this sounds crazy, okay, but I'll explain where my theory comes from. Here's a Sovryn Tech, a classic Sovryn Tech. I know this is Gaming Grid, but a classic Sovryn Tech prediction. Now, people have been saying for a long time that, right now we're in the 8th generation of video game consoles. Okay, and the Switch is part of that. People have been saying probably since like the 5th generation of consoles that this will be the last year of the console. Then everything's going to, cloud or some kind of subscription service or something like this. And I have constantly said, yeah, you guys keep saying that, but it never really happens. I think that the 8th generation, there are going to be like 9th generation consoles, sure. Like there's going to be a PlayStation 5, there's going to be an Xbox One follow-up, there's going to be, that. But I think this might be the last console, quote unquote, traditional console that Nintendo's going to make. I could be wrong, but I think this is going to be the last one. And that's part of the reason that I wanted it. And I think it's a shame that this is going to be true. I am not supportive of the idea of there no longer being consoles or physical copies of games and so on. But I think that's what's going to end up happening here. And I think that the Switch will probably be around for a long, long time. I think that Nintendo is kind of testing a theory by still supporting the 3DS line and by constantly pushing the 3DS. I think they want to see how far can we go with, how long can we make one of our generation of consoles last? A usual console generation will go, about 4 to 6 years, something like that. Okay. And then whatever support will drop, or whatever ends up happening with that. And now when a console generation dies, it's a fucking problem, because the console in many ways really does die, right? Like, you can't download WiiWare stuff anymore for your Wii, or I don't think you can get DSiWare anymore for your Nintendo DS, or DSi. When those shops shut down, when those eShops shut down, you're kind of fucked. As to where, the PlayStation 2, which is a few generations back, that I still play mine to this day, and will play it for fucking ever. I'll get the goddamn laser replaced. I'll do it myself if I have to. I'll never, from my cold dead hands, you're going to take my PS2, because some of the greatest games that are probably never going to get released for licensing issues and other things, I have to have that system. I just have to. Never going to lose that. Okay, but that's not true for the more modern systems, because they rely upon eShops, downloads, updates, and all this stuff. And anyway, it's just crazy. So that said, I think this will be the last. Basically, everything's going to go to Nintendo Switch Online. Now, Nintendo in the future might pull off like a Google Stadia, where they will sell you a controller of some kind, which might be, and I think maybe they had something similar in mind, or something close in mind for this, when they were, if you remember, there was the patent last year for like a Game Boy case for a smartphone that had controls on it. And people were wondering, well, does this mean that actually the Game Boy Classic isn't going to be a separate device, but it's going to be something that you connect to your smartphone and maybe logs into a service or something? Yeah, I could fucking, I could see that. I think that Nintendo's, in their eyes, and their future is going to be Nintendo Switch Online. That's going to become the thing. And they are lucky that the Nintendo Switch is such a wild success. And by the way, happy birthday to Nintendo. They are celebrating this week the 130th anniversary of the founding of the company. I don't think most people realize the company's been around for 130 years, back when it was making Hanafuda cards. But yeah, it has. And as much as I hate their intellectual property bullshit that they do against, really devoted fans, frankly, as much as I hate that, I have to admit, I gladly admit that I love the company. And I have to say that because I don't think there's, if the purpose in life is to be happy, I've said this many times over the years, if the purpose in life is to be happy, I don't think there's a company in the world that has put more smiles on people's faces than Nintendo. I don't believe it. I don't think not one single company could lay claim the way they have. And they've been doing it for a long time. Lots of smiles. Certainly put plenty of mine when I got my Switch Lite and started, fucking around with it. Big smiles on my face. So I guess I'm kind of letting that cat out of the bag. But you actually know, boy, cat out of the bag. You know where that phrase comes from? I was listening to a book about Captain Cook. The cat is not referencing the animal when you say cat out of the bag. That's actually referring to a cat o' nine tails whip. And that when you took it, you kept it in a bag because it'd be so, graphic content, folks. There's like bone at the end of it, and there'd be blood all over the bone. And so when the cat was coming out of the bag, shit was about to get real. Or you're about to reveal what was going to go down. Things are going to be serious. So saying cat out of the bag, that's actually a pretty brutal fucking statement. Ooh, it's bloody. Anyway, I let the cat out of the bag of the fact that, the Switch Lite, 2 thumbs up from me. Anyway, so my prediction, is that the Switch Lite's going to be, or the Switch, not Switch Lite, Nintendo Switch Online is really going to be the future. This is going to be the last traditional console. It will probably, the Nintendo Switch hardware itself will be able to access Switch Online and play Switch Online probably for the next 10 years. Something to keep in mind. The Nintendo Switch has only been with us since March of a couple of years ago, 2017. It's hilarious that I don't understand. Speaking in gaming journalism, why people are like, oh, what's the Nintendo Switch going to do now that, Sony and Microsoft are talking about what their next consoles are going to be, and they're going to be releasing them next year, all this. It's like, is the Switch already, what's the successor to the Switch? It's like, wait, what's the successor to the Switch? The thing's only been out there for 2 years. Can we breathe and enjoy the system for more than a couple of years? And that's really it, though, is that I think a lot of just about every company in the tech space, from Apple to Sony to Microsoft to Google to Nintendo, you name it, I think that they are afraid, even though I think Nintendo really could continue to pull off the hardware game, I think they all realize the only way we're going to continue to make money is if we just turn everybody into subscribers. And I'm not saying that's a good thing. Actually, I don't think it is. That doesn't mean Nintendo Switch Online is bad, by the way. We'll talk about that. But I think that's the way that, hardware is basically meaningless to a lot of these companies. And yeah, I mean, maybe they want to sell you a nice controller like Google does. But after that, it's, everything's going to have to be a subscription service. And I think that's the direction that they're really, really looking. What does that mean for, there's a big conversation to have around this, and now is not the time because I need to be doing a review of the Switch Lite. I'm just saying this is what, after messing with it and screwing around with Switch Online and everything else, like this is just the conclusion that I'm coming to. And there's more to it than that. In fact, all right, I'm not going to get into the conversation about the conversation I was just about to get into was, what do game developers do when you live in a world where games are no longer bought per game, but they're just part of a subscription service? I mean, it looks like Stadia is doing a hybrid of that, where you have to buy games, but then there's games that are available with your Stadia subscription. Anyway, we'll see. That's another conversation to have. Now, I'm going to let out another huge conclusion that I was really going to save for the end of this review of the Switch Lite. But another big conclusion is, so like I said, 2 thumbs up for the Switch. I love this thing already. I mean, I fucking love it. One of the greatest consoles already, in my opinion, ever made for so many reasons. Okay, I really, really like the system. I am taking nothing away from the system in what I am about to say. But what I'm about to say is that I can't believe how much the Nintendo Switch makes me want to play my 3DS. Like, it makes me want to pick up my 3DS. I mean, I've never put my 3DS down, unlike other people. But it makes me want to pick up my 3DS and rock it and carry it like all the time and be playing nonstop. Because granted for me, there are a ton of games that I have on my 3DS that I've yet to even get to. And I really want to play those first. like there's a big part of me that does that. But it's not only that. And this is part of what led me to the conclusion that Nintendo is really looking to get post-console, post-hardware. And just have people, subscribe to Switch Online or whatever, and have that be available on whatever screen they happen to have. And that is that it's amazing what the Switch can't do. It doesn't make it a bad gaming system at all. It doesn't even remotely make it a bad gaming system. Not even close. It's a great system. It's a great console. It's an awesome console. Have I said it enough times to where you realize that anything I am saying about it right now is not detracting from it? That it's not a negative. It's just a difference, right? Just because you're for something doesn't mean you're against the other, or it's antithesis. Okay. The 3DS has cameras, a microphone, software-wise, it has a web browser built in. It had, it even had Netflix. I mean, granted, the Switch does have a YouTube app, but it had a YouTube app, and I know these things are kind of getting shut down for the 3DS in certain geographies, or geographic areas. But the 3DS had so much. The 3DS was trying to be. I feel like when the 3DS was, and when I say 3DS, that includes new Nintendo 3DS and the 2DS and so on. I feel like when Nintendo was developing the 3DS, they were trying to create a smartphone competitor. I mean, like the 3DS has an MP3 player. I mean, it has so much shit built into it that it can do. It's a very complete piece of kit. It's a very complete piece of hardware. The Switch has practically none of that. Now, granted, you could say that you could add on to it because it has, Bluetooth, which is great, but not a whole lot of people are necessarily doing that. I mean, yeah, you have Labo, you have that new fitness game that they have coming out in October. You can add on accessories, certainly easier than you can with the 3DS, but that's what's so amazing is that the 3DS didn't need accessories, right? Everything was just in this little package. You can do so much with the 3DS. In comparison, besides outside of playing games, you can do so much with the 3DS, so much more than you can do with a Nintendo Switch. Now, it's easy enough for them to add software to a Switch. I'm not saying the Switch can't do these things, but there are some things it can't do, like just as a base unit, right? It's very interesting. And it makes me appreciate the 3DS so much more because of how much Nintendo, and then you had Street Pass. Remember when the DS had like its own communication protocol? That was amazing. You could just communicate locally, as long as the person was in range. Nintendo has really embraced, the internet and the subscription thing. But it is odd. And to make it worse is, that the Switch there's a web browser in there somewhere in its software, because to find friends, you can log into your Twitter account, and to log into a Twitter account, you have to go to a web page. You have to do an HTTP call. You can't avoid that. So it's got one. They just don't let you use it. They don't give it to you. And again, I've regularly tweeted from my 3DS. Really, I have. And in fact, I still do to this day when I think of something or whatever. And there's some social features on the Switch where you can share to Facebook or Twitter or whatever. But it's amazing how much this makes me love the 3DS more, and how much more it makes me want to play the 3DS. Partly because of just how mobile this thing is, that the Nintendo, particularly the Switch Lite, is, even though I know the Switch is as well. So all of that said, and again, that's pointing more at why I think Nintendo's looking to go post hardware, because they're doing so much less with hardware now than they used to. That's really what that's pointing at. But what they've done here with the Switch Lite, I think, is phenomenal. So I have the gray one. This came out in September 20th, 2019, and I did basically get mine on release day. And of course, I also, in fact, I talked about this on Zomia 1 content on a Q&A. I picked up Link's Awakening right away. That was just, it was guaranteed that I was going to get that for a few reasons, some of which I talked about on that Q&A. But I picked up, so far, I have a physical copy of Tetris 99, which also came with a 1-year subscription to Nintendo Switch Online, which is part of the reason that I got it. I did end up picking up Night Trap, of course, which I said would be the first game that I'd get for it, and it was, because it's the game that Nintendo said would never be on one of their systems back in the 90s, and, well, looky there. I'm looking at my Switch Lite right now, and it's on there. Picked up Anakin, which is a great platformer. Another game called Love, which is kind of a Atari-esque, like Atari 2600-esque platformer. It's a lot of fun. Got Kirby, Super Kirby Clash, Double Dragon 4, which of course on Sovryn Tech I named Game of the Year when it first came out. I think it's a tremendous fucking game. I've got that. I have the YouTube app on there. The YouTube app, real quick, let me just give a quick comment on that. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's no way to change the speed on the video that you're watching. That makes the YouTube app basically useless in my opinion, but whatever, it's there. And that's the list. And of course I have the Super Nintendo, I have the Switch Online, so I have the Super Nintendo games available on that, as well as the NES, the NES games available on that. We'll talk about those. Those are kind of separate conversations to have. I am amazed at and this is why I think also Nintendo, if they ever did stop making consoles, they'd still have to make a controller. The amount of buttons on this fucking thing are insane. It's actually a very complex system, especially compared to the 3DS. I feel like it's incredibly complex. And then also to have a touchscreen. There's so many control options on this thing. Granted, today, in 2019, the average controller, I think, has, somewhere around 20 buttons. But fuck, it is pretty insane. I do not think that the user interface is very friendly. It is a very confused user interface, in my opinion. Trying to find certain settings is an absolute pain in the ass, and I still haven't gotten used to it yet. I mean, I'm a tech journalist, and I've been in the tech space for decades, so it's not like I can't do it. I'm not stupid, but I'm just saying in comparison to Nintendo systems of the past, even just under those auspices, this is a very complex system to navigate. And I mean, it's really, frankly, it's ridiculous, and it doesn't have a good look either. I'm not knocking it. That's fine. These, you're here to play video games. Who the fuck cares about the menu system? I'm just saying, in comparison to other systems, it's not as friendly, user-friendly, or just looking friendly as past Nintendo systems have been. Nintendo, especially like with the Wii. Now, I never messed with the Wii U, so I can't really talk about that. But with the Nintendo Wii, I felt like the user interface on that felt like you were in the year 2090 or something. You felt like you were in this bright, beautiful, utopian future when you messed around with the UI on the Wii. The 3DS, I mean, a little cutesy, but you certainly, like, it felt a bit like the future. And especially if you use certain themes, it would feel even more so. Themes for the UI. The lack of themes, I mean, you have dark and light basically for the Switch, feels very bare bones. Like, why not? The themes were so popular with the 3DS. Why not have it for the Switch? I don't fucking know. But okay. And folks, before anybody asks, I'm not going to get into hacking the Switch or anything like that. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm sure homebrew stuff lets you do all kinds of shit that's great, but I'm not going there. There's a noted lack of customization with the UI. And it feels odd for a Nintendo system, because I always felt like every time you were playing with a Nintendo, it felt like you were playing in the future. That's part of its appeal, more so than anything Sony or even Xbox ever did. Though the original Xbox, the OG Xbox, and its 3D interface, which was the first of its kind for any computer, was pretty fucking brilliant and definitely felt like the future. But Microsoft dropped that, and then whatever. I don't know. I was never impressed with anything they did afterwards. As far as UI goes, granted, Microsoft has had an issue with UI for decades now, but regardless, not impressed with that. However, when you get into, and it's very simple, but the presentation for the NES library and the SNES library available through Switch Online, that feels a little more like what I would expect from Nintendo, but even then, it feels very bare bones. Very, very bare bones, especially compared to the gorgeous GUI, user interface that was on the NES Classic and the SNES Classic, on the retro consoles. Those were stunning presentations. And I mean, none of that animation, all that's completely gone from this thing. I don't mind, because again, I mean, I don't mind it too much. I'm just saying it is noted. And it's strange, because how good Nintendo is. Even today, how good Nintendo is at a great user interface and a great user experience. And I feel like, it's not just not there, it's fucking gone. It's gone. Now, maybe somebody could argue that it's because, well, with the Switch, with the Switch Lite, it's always mobile, but with the Switch, you have to have a user interface that works well between a gigantic TV screen and the small touch screen, depending upon how you're using your Switch. I could kind of get that argument, but come on, that can't be that fucking hard. If Ubuntu can do it, there's no reason Nintendo can't, for fuck's sake. So I found that to be a little odd. I'll be straight on that. Now, that said, user interface aside, that's about the only place that I could really complain. Granted, I am not dealing with a proper Switch, because on the proper Switch, you have the issue with the left Joy-Con, okay, which can separate off. The left Joy-Con, a common argument against it was that it didn't have a D-pad. It had what were basically 4 buttons that were supposed to operate like a D-pad, but it never ended up doing that very well. Now, you could get different Joy-Con from third-party companies like Hori or something like that, where it would have an actual D-pad on it. But the reason they didn't put a D-pad on the larger Switch is because you would detach the Joy-Cons and you'd use them as controllers, and it was designed for 2-player. and you'd hold it in a different angle when you did that. The Switch Lite, and maybe its biggest plus that a lot of people have pointed at, is that it does come with a full-on D-pad because you cannot detach the Joy-Con. You can connect Joy-Con via Bluetooth to it, and it still works very well. But yeah, so anyway, so that's nice. The controls on this thing are fantastic. I know there's already been one report of Joy-Con drift, or of drift on the on the analog stick. That's been an issue. There's kind of a big scandal around that. I don't think there's been any other reports of it. In fact, I kind of wonder if that report wasn't just something from some not industrial espionage, but you know what I mean. It was like some ugly tactic by Sony or Microsoft, quite frankly. I mean, Joy-Con drift is a real thing, okay, that Nintendo has had to deal with. But as far as we know now, the Switch analog sticks, or the Switch Lite analog sticks, are of a different make than the ones for the larger Switch. So anyway, the controls on this thing are, while there are a shit ton of controls on this thing, I mean, there's even like a dedicated screenshot button. It's pretty crazy. They're beautiful, and it feels really, really solid. It's a little small. It does feel a little cramped, I should say, not small. It does. The controls do feel a little cramped when you have these ridiculous man hands that I have, these double XL glove hands. But I picked up an accessory called Armor from Hori that puts nice little grips on the back of the Switch Lite that definitely makes this a lot easier for me to hold and makes it a lot more comfortable for me to control. So I do love having that armor. It's just like TPU rubber. It's like a case that you would put on a smartphone. And it's very beautiful. Like it actually has a clear plastic back to it that looks really, really nice. And you can see the Nintendo Switch symbol on the back and everything. I thought it was really, really cool. And it has no problem. It doesn't cover any of the ports really. The one thing I will say, so with the Switch, it does charge by USB-C. I love that. I mean, I really, really love that. And I'll tell you why. Because basically, my daily driver computer that I take with me portably, mobile and whatever, my Switch and my smartphone can now all charge from the same charger. And that is pretty nice, that especially if you're on the go or you're traveling, that you're not carrying 10 million chargers with you. Okay, I mean, that is pretty slick. So I do like that is USB-C. Now, since it does have USB-C, you can connect accessories to the USB-C port. And I did end up getting, specifically for the Switch Lite, I talked about this on the Zomi 1 Q&A this week, Underground Q&A, but I'll mention it here again since that's behind a paywall. I did pick up a stand for this that the Switch Lite can sit on that allows you to plug in to two USB normal USB-A ports that allows you to plug in two USB controllers. This would be great for like GameCube controllers to plug them in to be able to, so you could play Smash Brothers Ultimate or whatever, with GameCube controllers. And maybe in the future, with Switch Online, maybe you'll have GameCube games you could play or N64 games you could play. That could become a thing. It's great to have for that. However, the funny thing is, again, made by the same company. These are both accessories from Hori. The armor that the Switch Lite is in, and the stand that has the USB expansion ports. You can't use the stand with the armor on it. And I think that is so dumb. That's not a knock against Nintendo, because Nintendo didn't do it. Hori's the company that did it. And why would you sell me armor that I have to take off when I want to use your stand? Your stand, same company, your stand. Dumbass move. But something to keep in mind if you do want to accessorize. And these are kind of the two top accessories, I think, for the Switch Lite. It's just something to be aware of, but I think it's really, really stupid. So anyway, battery life on this thing. Let's start talking a little more hardware on this. The battery life is pretty good. I've gotten hardcore gaming, heavy duty, playing Link's Awakening, which does have some frame rate issues here and there. I usually don't care about that sort of thing, but it was kind of noticeable. I got maybe, 3 some odd hours out of it. It is supposed to have better battery life than the original Switch did. Of course, there's an updated model of the Switch proper out there now that has about a half hour extra of battery life than even the Switch Lite. But, to go a good 3 hours with this isn't bad. It is kind of weird that, granted, it's USB-C, so I can charge it and hook it up to a power pack and whatever. In fact, there's a part of me that is tempted to, like on the back of this armor, to like Velcro on a battery, like a, USB-C battery, and plug that in. That way I can double the life on this thing, because only 3 hours granted, your average smartphone, if you were gaming with it for 3 hours, isn't going to, or, if you're gaming for 3 hours straight, wouldn't do much better. And you'd have to find a wall jack to plug that into right away. I feel like if you're going to have some crazy long sessions with this thing, you're going to need to plug it in. And that can kind of become its own challenge, right? As to where the 3DS, I felt like I'd play it forever and it would never, I'd never run into an issue. With the Switch proper that you can plug into the dock and hooks up to the TV, that's not so much of a concern, right? Because it also happens to be a system, again, that's designed to be plugged in for extended periods of time. And, you play it on a television or something like that. So I imagine that wasn't so much of a concern there. But with the Switch Lite, because of that fairly low battery life and the fact that you can't switch out batteries, that does kind of feel like a negative. But it's really not. And again, I think that there's solutions for that anyway, that you could work out pretty easily. So if I had it plugged into that dock, or not the dock, but the stand from Hori that I picked up for the Switch Lite specifically, that allows you to, while it has the two USB-A ports, it still has a USB-C port to plug in an AC adapter. So that's one way, I suppose, to go about that, and then just play with the Joy-Con, and you're just playing on a little 5-inch or 5 and some odd inches screen. The screen is smaller than a Switch proper. The whole system obviously is a bit smaller. It's very noticeable when you stand them side by side, but gameplay-wise, I don't feel like it's that noticeable. I've heard some people say that they think it is. I really don't happen to think that it is. I've had no problems, even on the smallest of details, very easily seeing them on the screen. So like the small screen playing these what are meant to be, AAA world-class games that you'd play on a 60-inch television or something, I don't think there's been any issue in translation with that. Doing two-player, that's where things, I guess, could get a little weird, but then I, more often than not, am just doing one player on this. And the bulk of the games that I want to play on this, A, are one player, are meant for like single-player experiences, or B, there's something that I would play with people, via the internet anyway, multiplayer. So that's not so much of a concern. In the future, who knows, what that'll be. Like if they did add Nintendo 64 to Switch Online and you had a bunch of those games to go through, I might feel a little bit differently then. But by that point, maybe I'd be able to, you could have like multiple Switches. Maybe at that point, here's something that I think Nintendo could do. In fact, if they really want to get a Switch per person, I know they're testing out the Switch Lite, seeing how this sells, and apparently it has sold okay. It hasn't really done gangbusters, but I think it's sold okay so far. Granted, Christmas is coming up, so a lot of people are probably... First off, a lot of people probably thought that, even though they did pre-orders, that they wouldn't be able to get their hands on one, because Nintendo's notorious for either artificially or whatever fucking up pre-orders, and there not being enough for everybody. I don't think that was the case with the Switch Lite, but I can imagine people were probably sweating that, thinking like, well, I'm going to have to wait a month before I could get my hands on one anyway, so I'll just wait that month. This is probably going to be very popular for Christmas. Just saying. But something I think Switch could do, or Nintendo could do with the Switch, is not just have the Switch Lite, but have like the Switch TV, where it's just a little box that doesn't have a screen on it, doesn't need any of that, that is the opposite of the Switch Lite. Where the Switch Lite is meant to be handheld, the Switch TV could be one that's just that, meant for the TV. And they could probably get away with selling that for like $100. Since you don't have to put half the components on the damn thing. Why not? If you got this down to 200, you could probably get that down to 100. And maybe I wouldn't be surprised if they're planning that. I wouldn't be surprised if they're planning that for when like when the PS5 or the new Xbox comes out. And because, they'll own some asses with something like that. I think it's frankly, it's a matter of time before that happens. And even if it just accessed the Switch Online service, I think a lot of people would think it was worthwhile for $100. Especially if by that time, say this is a year or two down the road, you have N64 games on there, Game Boy games, all the things you usually expected from Virtual Console with like the Wii, Wii U, and 3DS, if you had all those things available, I think that'd be an instant winner. And maybe they're test marketing that to see with how does the Switch Lite sell? Would people want a Switch TV? It's probably going to happen. So anyway, yeah, I mean, this feels, it's not, especially with the armor on it, this is not as pocketable as the 3DS, obviously. In fact, I want to say it's not very pocketable at all. And I'm a guy who has huge pockets. I can fit an e-reader or even like a 7-inch tablet easily in my pocket. But this is a little thicker just because of the nature of some of the controls on it, that it doesn't feel pocketable, and you're scared to death of like fucking up the analog sticks, you know? So it doesn't slide into the pockets very, very nicely like your pant pockets. But as far as like if you just have a bag, you know, if you have a man bag or a purse or whatever, things like this, it could sit very well in those. There was a cover, like a flip cover, that almost made it look like a DS or a 3DS that Nintendo is offering in Japan, and I think they're releasing it in Europe as well. That has not come out in the US yet. They're like $30. If that comes out, maybe then you could slide it into your pocket more easily, but I don't know. Anyway, if that ends up getting released, I'll probably pick that up. So, talk a little bit about the games. I'm not going to do a full review of Link's Awakening yet because I have not completed the game, but so far I can tell you this, it is fucking awesome. Double Dragon 4, I've reviewed that on Sovryn Tech in the past. I think it's a brilliant goddamn game. I know it got a lot of flack for being a game that played just like it was in the 90s. I think that is actually its appeal, is that it does play like it's just in the 90s, or like it came out of the 90s. So I think that that's awesome. Tetris 99 is a shit ton of fun. Anakin is, again, a great platformer. I haven't gotten into like Smash Brothers or Mario Odyssey and so on. But, you know, we all know how great those games are. So I don't need to do a review of those there. But the controls and everything else playing in the games that I played so far were fantastic. So I think it's worthwhile to talk about, you know, just to get past that. I mean, the game selection for the Switch is dynamite. I mean, even just the first party, you know, Nintendo release, the Zelda games and so on that are available right now, you could play those the rest of your life, or what is effectively the rest of your life. So even if it doesn't have the same large library that that PlayStation has or that Xbox has, the few games that the Switch does have, and one's even coming, Luigi's Mansion 3, there's a re-release of Xenoblade Chronicles coming. I mean, there's so much great shit that came out of that Nintendo Direct in earlier September, earlier this month. Just with like 10 games on the Switch, you could be playing those for fucking ever. And I don't get the attitude, like, there's no way, I don't believe it. All of the quote-unquote great AAA games coming out for the PlayStation, even for PC or for Xbox, I don't believe anybody that they play all of those to satisfaction. Like, maybe they play 10 minutes of it and then they walk away and they're like, oh yeah, I played that, oh, it was fucking awesome. No, you didn't really play it. Come on. Like, most of these games that we're talking about, if you have even a part-time job, or if you're going to school or something like that, you can't possibly have the amount of time to play all of the great AAA games that everybody supposedly plays on all of these other systems. It's just not possible. So I think you know, a couple Zelda games and some of the Final Fantasies and everything on here that are available in the eShop, you could be playing those forever, and they're dynamite games, and some are modern, some maybe not so modern. For example, actually, and I brought this also up on the Zombie One Underground Q&A that I mentioned from this week, and that is the amount of games that were ported to the Switch that were indie hits on PC, even like 8 years ago. We'll just say over the past decade that are on this now. The ones I've played, it's a great platform for them. The controls largely feel awesome. Unless it's like a first-person shooter. In fact, I think this is being proven true in a lot of ways with a lot of releases, including Jedi Outcast, which got re-released for the Switch. And anyway, I'll talk about that more on TIE Fighter Renegades with Rob. But the first-person shooter controls without a PC, without a PC, without a keyboard and mouse, first-person shooter controls suck. Yes, they do. The Wii actually had a solution for that, where but that's because the Wii remote or the Wiimote work like a mouse. It was like a pointer. So those controls were okay. All right. But yeah, I don't buy first-person shooter controls on console. Like, they just don't work. But regardless of that, everything else, the platformers and all the stuff that have come out over the past decade on PC and maybe a couple other platforms, do remarkably well on the Switch and are finding new life on the Switch. And I'm really glad for that, because I think a lot of console players like missed out on those games. And they have every right to be here. And I'm really enjoying that. But it's amazing how much, like, a lot of those games I've had, say, in my Steam library or my GOG library for a decade, and I just never touched them. Now I want to play them, because with the Switch, it's so easy to just pick it up and rock and roll, and you don't have all the distractions that come along with even a laptop, with a PC of any kind. It's really nice. And I gotta give, that's definitely a strength for the Switch, is the lack of distractions. As much as I complained about the GUI on it, its Spartanness actually really hones you in on play the game, and keeps you from doing other things. And I will respect it for that. If that was Nintendo's thinking, then I get it. But again, I still kind of wish that the UI just had if anything, I wish it had some customization. Even if Nintendo had different intentions, it'd be nice if they'd give the user a little more control on that. So anyway, let's talk about, so we got all that. Like, there's plenty of games available in the eShop, plenty of games to, make sure you get, I will say this, make sure you get a pretty good sized SD card for this baby. I got a 256 gig SD card on it. I forget how much it can actually hold, or what size it can take, but yeah, get a good SD card for this baby, because it doesn't have much onboard storage, and you're probably going to be getting a lot of games from the eShop. So that said, let's talk about Switch Online. Switch Online right now allows for cloud saving with games. It has a little bit it has the voice app for your smartphone that has some degree of a chat service. You can become friends with people via Switch, and you can do multiplayer through Switch Online. Those features are there. Then there is there's the NES library of games and the SNES library of games. And that's really the big thing that I think people are concentrating on with Switch Online. Switch Online costs, what is it, like $20 or something a year. And if you're doing like a family plan, it's something closer to 40, something like that. I don't think the cost is crazy. In fact, if they did anything more, I think they'd run into trouble, because people are already getting sick of subscription services across the board, regardless of what part of the entertainment industry we're talking about, gaming, movies, whatever. So the price, I think, is right. I am not displeased with the games available to play on Switch Online. Like, I think that the NES games, and I don't mind that, I get it. There's a part of me that has bought some of these games, like, say, for the NES, Super Mario Brothers, Zeldas, whatever. I've bought them so many times over that there's a part of me that's really okay with not having to buy them again, and instead just stream them, just because I have bought them so many times. And not only that, but also that a lot of these are games that you can buy. Okay, they are not available streaming only. You can go out and buy Super Mario Brothers and play it on a console from, hell, even 30 years ago, So I don't feel constricted by the streaming services. It's just one option of how to play this with play these games with Switch Online. I do think it's nice, particularly with the NES library, that there are special editions of these games, and we've talked about some of these on Gaming Grid in the past, like with Gradius and so on. I do like that there's like special editions of them where maybe you can see what the ending of the game looks like, or what it's like to play Link on with full power in the original Legend of Zelda and so on. That's a really nice little feature that they did not have to do. And the game selection is pretty good so far. They're going to keep adding more. Nintendo did announce this month that they're not going to do monthly releases of games anymore. I don't mind that. They'll just come out with them, I guess, whenever they feel like there's a need or something. But Dr. Mario's there. I spend a ton of time playing that in the NES library. Blaster Master, I love that game. There's a lot there. Granted, I think it's always going to be hindered by the fact that now, game developers developing houses, game companies, Capcom, SNK, Konami, go down the list. Now that they know there's money in repackaging old games, they are going to sell them in their, on their own. Like you have the Konami Classic series, you have the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection, you have the Capcom collections, and so on. You have the Mega Man collections that have come out, which, by the way, we got a Mega Man Zero and Mega Man ZX collection coming out in January 2020. I am so fucking on board with that, even though I already have those games on cartridge from the DS for my 3DS, so I could play them now anyway. But regardless, you definitely want to keep an eye out for that. So these libraries that are available with your Switch Online subscription are never going to be as complete as Virtual Console collections from, say, Nintendo have been in the past. They're just not going to be, because these game companies are going to re-release them themselves. Okay. And I get that. Like, I understand that. But there's a lot of games, especially first-party games from Nintendo, that they could keep releasing. And if they keep coming out with consoles, and especially if they go so far as even, Wii games would be a challenge, because that would, I guess it would just require an accessory. But if they would go so far even as GameCube to release, a lot of the first-party games from all those consoles, I think there's a lot of gamers that missed out on a lot of what Nintendo was doing throughout the mid-90s to the early aughts, that I think would be a real win. I can see the potential of what Switch Online is doing. I get it that compared to the PlayStation Network, compared to Xbox Live, that it is also bare bones. I don't mind that. I don't mind what Nintendo's doing. I kind of see where they're going with it. I think that the feature set will be complete down the line, and I think that they have plans for what that will eventually look like. I think that they have to move slowly because they don't have understand, Sony and Microsoft have had server farms for, decades now. For Nintendo, this is a new thing. This is not, playing games off of a server or whatever, even though they locally install them temporarily so that you can play some of these games offline if you happen to be offline. Nintendo, this is new. They're treading new water, and I think they need to test out server loads and a lot of these other things to make sure that it's a solid experience. So I can appreciate that Nintendo is going through growing pains that Sony and Microsoft did not have to, because, Sony was doing MMOs before they ever took a PlayStation Online. They were the ones behind Matrix Online and so on. Microsoft, of course, has had Azure and their own servers for fucking ever. So they understand that side of things. Nintendo has to learn. And I get it that they're learning. So I don't mind the growing pains of Switch Online. I think Switch Online does deliver value for price asked. Could it be better? Yes. Is it going to be? I guarantee it. So I'll hold out for that. I'm really fine with that. So overall, the Switch Lite, with the especially first-party games available, some of the exclusives like Bayonetta and so on, that are only available for the Switch, to have all of this in a handheld package and a all-inclusive package it's a nerd dream come true. This is what the Game Boy always. Here's the thing, is that I think before there was a NES, Nintendo did handheld gaming. Before there was even a NES, okay? The Game Boy was really the dream that Nintendo always wanted. And that said, I think that the Switch, particularly the Switch Lite, is the dream, even though they're going to go in other directions. Like I said, they'll probably do Switch TV, they'll do all that. The Switch Lite is a culmination of probably what Nintendo has wanted for literally decades, since the era of the NES, and even before. This is what they've wanted. And now they've got it, and it's a wild success. There's a lot of hard-earned lessons. They have a tremendous history to pull from to make this a very unique value proposition. But after messing around with it, I don't want to take my hands off of it. I want to rock it. I want to carry it with me at all times. I really, really, really love the Switch Lite. I love the fact that, it's not, it's kind of why are laptops so popular? Because everything you need to do on the computer and everything you want to do is in one clamshell package. Nintendo has always been about that. Switch Lite is basically the latest iteration of such. And I love the fact the screen's here. Everything is here. And, I don't have to. I mean, you can buy Joy-Con for it. You can get accessories for it. You can hook up the Pro Controller to it, whatever. But you don't need to. It's an all-in-one package playing modern gaming, playing the latest and greatest. Maybe they're different than some of their, other console siblings versions. But regardless, this is very much the Nintendo dream come true. Now I think Nintendo is moving on to the next part of that dream, which, like I said, is probably just going to be where everything from Nintendo is just subscribing to Switch Online and maybe buying a controller from Nintendo, which, again, I don't want that future. And part of the reason, like I said, that I have a Switch Lite is that I do think this could very well be the very last Nintendo console ever. I don't like that. But boy, if somebody's going to do it online, they have the right library to do it online. And nobody makes controllers better than Nintendo. That's just a fact of life. Well, maybe Sega did, but, with the Dreamcast. But the Dreamcast was just, that's a whole other... In fact, 20 years, September 9th, 1999, celebrating 20 years now in 2019, celebrating 20 years of the Dreamcast. Way to fucking go. And I mean that. What a great system. Still the greatest system probably ever made. But the Switch Lite's a hell of a contender, I have to say. But again, to my point is that other than the Dreamcast, which is just a fluke in the gaming world, so far ahead of its time, a real look at the future. In fact, speaking of the future, I was saying how UIs from Nintendo are always the future. The Dreamcast theme for the UI on the 3DS, that's what I always have on mine because it just feels like the future. But anyway, other than the Dreamcast, not counting that fluke, beautiful fluke, Nintendo has always done hardware the best. They've always done the best controllers, in my opinion. And there's a reason people still clamor for a GameCube controller, 3 console generations later, and why Nintendo is willing to give people that. So I could see a future, where Nintendo is just Switch Online and selling you great controllers. I don't like it, but I could see it happening, and if anybody's going to do it, it's a pretty good bet they'll be doing it the best. So the Switch Lite, if I were to give it an out of 10, frankly, I'll be not as generous as I want to be. I was going to give it a 10 out of 10. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Just because there are things that I want from the Switch more locally, and I don't know, but a year from now, actually, really with what Switch Online can offer, and if more apps come out, I could see this becoming a 10 out of 10. In fact, I really do understand because of this. Even though there's I think there's a ton of controls and that can make for some complexity and it's kind of hard to get around on it. I do get because it is an all-inclusive package and it can do some things really well. Like a smartphone is an all-inclusive package, but it doesn't do anything very well. It's very much, jack of all trades, master of none. I feel like that's a smartphone. As to where the Switch is also, or at the very least could be a jack of all trades, but it does master some, like gaming. Like it masters it like no other. And so I kind of understand, I didn't understand this attitude before, but I've seen for the past couple of years where you have more and more people, Nintendo fans and whatever, Switch owners, who have said, could my Switch just do everything, please? I want to do everything on the Switch. I kind of understand why they feel that way, because again, it is a master at a couple of things. And so then, if it could just do a couple more, whatever that might be, I don't know, watching video, I know people want a Netflix app. I couldn't care about that, but doing those few other things, I could see where for people, this could be the go-to device, and frankly, if you had like a smartphone that can tether for free, like if you had Google Fi or something like that, or not that it's for free, but like you don't have to pay an upcharge for it, or that tethers very well anyway. You'd always have this like always connected, or not. I don't want things to be always connected, but it could be an always connected package. This is very attractive, and I finally get it why people want this system to do everything, because it's nice to just pull this thing out and I really wish, even if it just had a Twitter app, I'd be happy. I really do want it to have that. So yeah, great system, really, really great system. But then also, like I said, paradoxically, it makes me want to play my 3DS more, which is so weird. But I do love it. So there's your Switch Lite review. I don't really have much of anything negative to say. I recommend getting your hands on one if you don't already have a Switch. If you already have a Switch, I don't think that there's a point to having a Switch Lite. I really don't. But if you don't have one, go for it. I think you're in for a great time, and for the asking price of $200, it's an all-in-one that just does the job and does it better than anybody else. So rock and roll with it. Anyway, that's it for this episode of the Gaming Grid. We'll wrap this up. It's a little longer than most episodes of the Gaming Grid, and I'll have some other ones because there's a lot of gaming news I wanted to get into, but I knew I wouldn't be able to get into in this episode. So maybe we'll have another Gaming Grid come out in pretty short order. And well, until then, I'll see all of you on the other side.
Game over.